Sam Altman is also.
Yeah,
the dude is on a roll.
He's got his hands in everything, and we're ultimately trying to deduce what his ultimate game plan is here. I don't fully understand it quite yet, but between AI, one world currency, and then what he's getting ready to do with Reddit, which is the Reddit IPO, not only does it seem crazy the valuation that they're giving this thing, but he has some plans, I'm sure, to leverage that with AI in order to bring it to life. So I'll let you break it down for us.
Roger that. Well, this article comes by way of TechCrunch. Headline reads, Reddit's planned IPO share price seems high unless you look at its AI revenue. And shout out to Cole C-Rock in the background who brought this on the radar. Reddit's IPO plans are coming into focus with a new S-1 filing released Monday morning that sets the initial price range for its stock at $31 to $34 per share. If investors agree to pay its high-end range, its valuation should hit around $5.4 billion. At the low end of this range, $31 billion. Though Reddit would be worth 4.93 based on expected 158 million shares outstanding. Others have circulated a potential valuation of closer to over 6 billion mark by including options held by employees and others. In any case, everyone seems to believe it will emerge as a company at or above the $5 billion mark. Something of a Mendoza line for Reddit, given the clues of its secondary market trading activity showed on pricing prior to its IPO filings. Key point here, with $804 million in 2023 revenue, Reddit is on track to trade for a multiple of 6.9x to 8x its revenue, depending on the valuation estimate you want to use. Given that Reddit is an unprofitable, long-established social media company and one that depends on advertising that feels a tad expensive, unprofitable Snap, for example, is currently worth 4.34x with its revenues highly profitable. Meta is worth 9.86x with its own trailing revenues. Reddit's game plan for AI is one good reason why it's pricing its shares closer to Meta than Snap. So really the secret linchpin is that AI piece that's really given the investing value. Reddit sold $203 million worth of contracts to AI companies for access to its data earlier this year. And just with a quote from the company, we are in the early stage of monetizing our emerging opportunity in data licensing by allowing third parties to access, search, and analyze data on our platform. I wonder how the users feel about this. In January 2024, we entered into certain data license arrangements with an aggregate contract value of $203 million in terms ranging from 2 to 3 years. We expect a minimum of $66 million of revenue to be recognized during the year ending December 31st, 2024. And the remaining thereafter. Last but not least, while this didn't reveal the buyer in such contracts, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman holds an 8.7% stake in Reddit, making him the third largest shareholder. He was also once a member of the company's board of directors. The article continues on with more about it, but that's more than enough to cover really the nuts and bolts of what we're looking at here with a company going IPOing, but also having this real nugget of value here on the AI side that's beginning to lean on heavily.
AI, and they have 70 million daily active users, 850 million users who use it once a month. So 70 million are using it daily, 850 million that are coming in at least once a month. They get about 30 billion views every month. That was 2020.
Yeah.
So I think that the topic at hand, or what we should be talking about as it relates to this, is in and around this data licensing idea.
Yeah.
Who does that data belong to? So we're, according to we'll call it Web 2.0, which is how Google and Amazon and Reddit and Snap and Meta and all them were built, the data belongs to the company. Centralized, right?
Right.
And so this begs the question of, as we move into a more AI-driven type of world, should that data belong to the company or should it belong to me? Because I don't want my personal information or thoughts necessarily being, put into the machine per se, and then them selling that data and using it however they want.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it goes back though to like you're using their product, though. It's like the equivalent of coming over to their house.
It is. I mean, I guess to a certain extent. And so this is kind of what the push for, call it Web 3.0, is really kind of leaning towards, which is this idea of decentralization and ownership over your own data.
Right. Well, let me ask then, what might be the long-term implications of, such a strategy in terms of using data with its community? That would be the question I think is.
I mean, I bet there's something to be learned from that data. I mean, it's right up there with a search engine like Google. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't ultimately know what the implications. Who learned you how to spoke? I don't know what the implications are of that, but I could imagine that information would be valuable and useful in informing their algorithm to parse data, make decisions. Do you guys see this being a trend? I think it has to be, right? I mean, it is the direction that most. It is the next hot thing, right? It is like revolutionizing. It's why we talk about AI so much. It's why we're trying to embrace it as much as we possibly can, because it is the pivot and it is where the market's going. And still don't feel like I know enough about it.
Yeah,
and I feel like I'm more competent than most, but.
I do think it would be a trend just because the value is in the data. And so if my competitor is going to obviously get a leg up, have an advantage, be able to create a better product, have a better relationship with consumers by way of leveraging the data, albeit through AI, and I'm not, then I'm basically saying I don't want to be in business, or I don't want to stay around in this manner that I currently am in.
Yeah. So, I mean, software is innately better at solving problems and equations than we are as human beings because it can do it rapidly and perfectly. So that is definitely going to be a trend. I think too, if you just look at like the challenges that come along with, let's just say, running advertisement on Facebook. If you don't understand all the bells and the whistles of how it works and how to build a custom audience and, what your impression share looks like versus your click through and how to really identify where the breakdowns are, then you're not getting the most out of the platform. And if you don't actually see the result, what do? You leave, right?
Right.
And so if they can remove that need for people to know that stuff or have to look out agencies, they won't need agencies anymore, and the equations and the algorithms could solve themselves and inform better data and more personalized marketing to users, then that makes their platform better. Yeah. So for sure. I think they're going to embrace it.
Then how are these companies getting away with valuing themselves so much higher?
I mean, it's eyeballs, man. Who owns 850 million users a month? I mean,
right.
Most of the television channels can't even say that.
Correct.
So it's kind of interesting timing because up until, call it the last couple of years, that's how most businesses were valued, right? You didn't even have to make money. You just had to grow your user base. You had to do more revenue each and every year, whether it was profitable or not. I mean, Amazon's never turned a profit. Look how big they are, right? It's because they were constantly reinvesting that capital back into the business. So
are those companies expected to make a profit at some point, or not?
I think if you're new to the market today and you're trying to raise money or go public, yes, you're expected to be profitable. But if you have, that many users and that much data and you've been around for that long, you're writing a different.
Yeah, you're
playing with a different sheet music than everybody else.
You're navigating different waters. Yeah,
correct.
100%. Yeah. Your boat's different.
It seems crazy though, but
yeah,
I mean, advertising doing $850 million a year, so almost $1 billion a year in revenue, is nothing to scoff at.
Correct. I think the one piece we talk about long-term implications, which is just coming on the back of what we were previously discussing, which is, the consumer, in order to sort of be a mainstream consumer, you're almost faced with a choice of, do I want to continue to play ball in this way?
Right.
So do I want to continue? Okay, maybe I'm not signing up for WorldCoin, but I'm going to actually have my data on this platform being used by the very people instituting this thing. And so it's almost like we're inevitably heading for this breaking point of people who want to be a part of the centralized machine and then those who want to live in a decentralized manner. And it's almost equivalent to like things we've seen in stories and books and Hunger Games kind of stuff where there's like sub-levels of communities where they're still functioning, but their way of life is different because they're not a part of the machine. They didn't buy in or whatever it is. And I just get that sense when I'm reading this kind of stuff where I'm like, oh, we're talking about WorldCoin. And without being a theorist of any kind, it just seems inevitable. When you're reaping what you're sowing, these things can't really exist entirely in the same space,
It can't, but the government will continue to use those things to confuse its people because they'll talk about a digital currency, right? But the point of like a cryptocurrency is to be able to operate outside the system,
right,
like in a decentralized fashion. I don't need the US dollar to do a transaction with you if
right,
you and I both agree that
correct,
X, Y, and Z currency has value. That's why they don't like that, right? And why they try to put rules and regulations around your ability to like create currencies and whatnot. So, I think we're just going to be moving to that direction. But I had Cole pull up this chart for everybody, this Web 2.0 versus Web 3.0, which is kind of piggybacking off of what you just said. So in the current, we'll call it centralized web, right? Everything runs off of fiat currency, right? We want to buy a product, we use dollars essentially to do it. Cookie tracking, right, which is the ability to track every single user. Web 2.0 is divided by layout technologies that provide more dynamic control than Web 1.0, CSS and AJAX. You have relational databases, so that kind of like the user base, right, and all the information about them, and then using that information to run ads or target or do whatever it might be in social networks. In Web 3.0, everything's decentralized. So it's peer-to-peer. There's no middleman effectively running it. It runs off of cryptocurrency, runs off of non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and it uses AI because it's smarter, autonomous, right? Includes machine learning. Runs off the blockchain, which is actually making it more secure.
Right.
So we can do a transaction, but this idea of doing it anonymously is not really a thing anymore, which is actually better if you're truly trying to crack down on money laundering and trafficking.
All the things they try to scare us with.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then obviously this idea of, the metaverse. Instead of social network, this more like immersive experience and how we engage and whatnot. So that seems kind of far off, but I'm sure that seemed the same way, in 1983 when the internet was born.
Well, who would have imagined an Apple Vision Pro 25 years ago, right?
Correct.
Like,
it is operational now, right?
It's
like this integration of technology and the web and everyday life.
Right. Yeah, something that I think about when I think about the internet, the internet was it was actually supposed to be it had a decentralization component at its core to make sure that our military wasn't dependent on one central place and stuck. And then you just look at the way it was configured to serve purpose for knowledge transfer and all these different things. And you just see that Web 3.0 makes sense. Bitcoin makes sense that these things would be inevitable by way of the internet.
The internet has created the network effect, right? So, everybody thinks of like data and servers. They just think about, big warehouses stored full of servers, but they don't realize that there are what are called proxy servers that allow us to use millions and millions upon millions of computers in order to transact and do things in a more discrete way on the web because of the network.
Correct.